Hello, I'm Margaret Cahill from the Wessex Astrologer, and this interview came about because I asked Alex if she had an article that would be suitable to go on the blog on our website, wessexastrologer.com. And the article she suggested turned out to be one that she wrote a while back for the Organisation of Professional Astrologers on the subject of working with children in astrology. I must admit, I hadn't really thought through the implications of this and of reading the chart for anybody under the age of 18. In fact, I thought before I spoke to Alex, it would be a really good way to introduce young people to astrology. But talking to Alex, I realised that possibly it could put an astrologer in a very vulnerable situation. So this is what we're going to talk about today, the pros and cons. Is there ever an appropriate time to do a consultation with somebody under the age of 18? So let's find out. So thank you, Alex, for doing this.
Thank you, Margaret.
Can you start by telling us what inspired you to write the article in the first place, what it's called and why you decided to write it?
Well, I'm a teacher, and as I've said quite a few times, I was banned from using astrology as a teacher, and being a teacher, I was used to working with children. I have to go through all sorts of checks. I have to have a clear police record. That has to be checked every single year. We're trained in child protection as a teacher. At the start of every single term, we're reminded of the child protection rules. So, it was kind of ingrained in me, about, how you deal with children, and you don't put yourselves into a vulnerable situation by, being in a room with a closed door where no one can see you with a child on your own. My own office was under CCTV all the time, so it was just, just the way I was working. It never even occurred to me that other people didn't know about this. And it was through talking with a few astrologers, and, they were saying, things like, they thought it was okay to work with the under 18s without a parent present, because what if having that parent present stopped the communication, like the child wouldn't open up to the astrologer. And, my reaction was, you don't want a child to disclose something because, you might not know what to do about it. Now, as a teacher and working in child protection, I know what to do because I've been trained. But, this is something that astrologers aren't trained in. And so by having an unsupervised child in your consultation office, you could be, you could put yourself you are putting yourself in a very vulnerable situation. And, if you think I'm being paranoid, just look at what happened to Prince Andrew, who allowed himself to be in a compromised situation with someone who's under 18. And 20 years on, he's having to face some serious questions, and he's had some very serious consequences. So, my advice, is absolutely do not have an under 18 unsupervised in your office. But having said this, astrology is a very powerful tool. And, teenage, being an adolescent is a very difficult time of life. And, I think it's important that, we don't ban astrology with working with children, but we make very careful parameters so it can be used. So, the way I work with teenagers is I have the parent with me in my office. I work with them. And I always start with the parent, with the Saturn and the cycles of Saturn. I get the parent to talk about their teenage years and how they felt so they can sort of remember that it's a difficult age, and so they can connect with their child better. I only use Jupiter and Saturn in my consultations because I don't want to probe too much, and I want to open up the lines of communication between the parent and child, and looking at the synastry between Jupiter and Saturn, as well as with the siblings if they're there as well. But even on a Zoom meeting, I wouldn't want to have an unsupervised child. Now when we're in quarantine, everyone's supervised, but you have to be very careful because you don't want to have the child say something, and then it becomes your responsibility to do something about it. So if the parent is there and the child discloses something, it's the parent's responsibility because the child's under the parent's care. And the other issue around working with children is, nobody comes to an astrologer because everything is wonderful. They come to an astrologer because they have a problem that needs to be solved. And, and because I'm trained in child protection, I know what to do if I'm, dealing with an underage pregnant girl, if there's a self-harmer, any of these issues. I know what to do because I've worked in the school system. And, most schools, well, I would say all schools, have a very clear policy on safeguarding and child protection, in that, you can't even enter the school unless you have a police clearance. And you have to sign papers that say that you understand the school's child protection policy. So, it's really serious stuff, and there's no gray area in this. You shouldn't, if you're not trained in child protection, if you don't have police clearance, you really should be completely discouraged from working with children without a parent present. And I would say, even if you had a parent present and you're not skilled with working with children specifically, you probably should have some additional training. Now, Kepler College, I'm running a course with Kepler College on this very topic. And I've also done something recently with MISPA, which is Online Center for Psychological Astrology. So it's a specialized branch of astrology, I'm going to argue, and it's something that needs to be taken quite seriously. I'm working with a lot of the bigger organizations to update their ethics to say that, unless you're qualified, you shouldn't be working with under 18s.
Okay, yeah. So if I could just play devil's advocate for a moment, because I haven't ever done a consultation for somebody who's a minor, apart from, in our family. So these things hadn't occurred to me before. But if you consider that in the UK, somebody who's 16 can have a sexual relationship legally, they can have a full-time job, they can open a bank account. At 17, they can drive a car. And yet what you're proposing is, if they're under 18, then their parents have to be present. So are we regarding them as an adult who can do these, big things, obviously, or as a child because they're under 18? And I'm thinking also that teenagers in that age group are more likely than not, surely, to want to talk about their personal relationships, especially the 16 to 18 age group. And they're not going to do that with their parents there. So does that mean you can't see them at all? I mean, how does that work? What do you think about that?
Yeah, first of all, there's a lot of things they can't do until they're 18, go into a pub and drink alcohol, buy an alcoholic drink. And there's lots of things they can't do. And we have these things in place to protect our children. Now, I would be extremely uncomfortable if a child came to me to talk about their sex life and there wasn't some sort of CCTV or some sort of somebody watching me. I'm worried about, me and, maybe being accused of something or instigating this conversation with the child. So I'd still want to be very, very careful. And you're absolutely right. If the parent is there, the child might not want to talk about that. But the thing is, that child would have other people that they can talk to that are safe, that they are more skilled in dealing with it than the average astrologer. If they go to a school, all the teachers are trained in how to deal with this. But as an astrologer, I think I'd be very uncomfortable, especially in my office with this me and them on my own if this topic comes up. And that's one of the things I would say is a good reason not to see the under 18s, because you're in a vulnerable position. Now, if the parent is there, I'm all about opening up those lines of communication. I appreciate that, teenagers don't want their parents to know about their sex life, and they don't want to know about their parents' sex life either. But, it's just a matter of keeping yourself safe. And, you can, if the topic comes up and the child wants to disclose something, it's just that if it happens, you're in a position where you have to know what to do about it. You say, 16, or what if the boyfriend or the girlfriend is over the age of 21 or something? Then you have a problem that is now your problem to deal with, and you have to know what to do. So, I would just say you have to be very cautious, if you decide to work with children. And I would say having the parent there saves a lot of potential difficulties, because, as I said, the parent is responsible for that child, and it's their job to do something. Now, as an astrologer, you still have to be able to estimate or analyze if the parent is competent. There might be a reason why you think the parent isn't going to act or isn't going to do something, and you still have to do something about it. So I think working with children's chart is a minefield, and you have to be trained properly to know what to do, and to make things really complicated. Laws differ from state to state, from country to country as well. So are you going to take that on? Are you really going to take that risk? So I would just say, yes, it's a powerful tool, but know what you're going to, know where your boundaries are. Like I said, I only talk about Jupiter and Saturn, because I can talk about Jupiter and Saturn, for hours. So it's just, knowing, the parameters that you need to keep, and staying within your skill set. You're not training to, do something that you just don't have the skills to do, because you can do a lot of damage. So that's my advice to astrologers is, unless you have a specific skill set, child psychology degree or a teaching degree or something, I would say that the working with children it isn't for you. It's too risky. It's it can cause you a lot of problems further down the road if the child comes back to as an adult and makes a complaint, or if the parent makes a complaint. If a child tells you something, this is very important, child protection. If they say, I try to make you promise not to say anything, all it's going to take is for that child to tell another adult that they've told you a secret, and you're in really deep trouble, because you can, when you're working with children, you cannot promise confidentiality. You cannot. You have to do something with this information that they've given you, which is all the more reason why, keep the parent in the room, so the parent is responsible. It sounds really paranoid, but, as I said, just look at what happened to Prince Andrew. To me, it's just not worth the risk.
Okay. Is there any advice that you would offer to astrologers who maybe are at psychic fairs or festivals? If somebody approaches them, they get the birth data from them, they realise obviously that they're under 18. Would you suggest to them that they come back with their parents, or would you just say, I'm sorry, but I can't give you a reading? How would you suggest they handle it so that it doesn't look as if the kid's being rejected?
Well, just make it clear that you only see over the 18s. If you are in a field somewhere, it's over 18s only, or it should be, or supervised children. On my website, when I have my products and services, I make it clear about what I do, that I don't see unsupervised children. So I make it very clear what I'm doing. And my credentials as well, I make those clear too. So, I just think, I don't even have any sort of qualm about saying no or refusing to read for somebody who's under 18, because to me, it's not worth the risk. And yeah.
Okay. So assuming they've got their parent present then, in your office, you said that you just use Jupiter and Saturn. So you don't go into the personal planets at all. Is that what you're saying?
Only like a light touch, and I really encourage the parent and child to talk, and I'm just looking at cycles of development with Jupiter and Saturn, because just think about it. If you got the mom there with you and you're talking about the child's moon, you're creating a tension that doesn't need to be there. Sure, you could tell them you got moon in Virgo, and you go into a little bit, but just a light touch. I mean, don't let them get too carried away, because Jupiter and Saturn are the cycles of development in children, and as we get older. So those are the stars of the show, in my opinion. But yeah, you can talk a little bit about them, but I'm careful. It's when I work with over 18s, obviously it's different. Then I'm talking about the personal planets, because they're ready to hear that. But with the under 18s, you just want to keep things neat and concise, clear, and you don't want to muddy the water with too much personal detail in front of their parents.
Okay. Do you use Mercury in those readings? Because surely that is maybe the star.
I might mention Mercury, but to me, Jupiter is the planet for learning. I know everybody thinks it's Mercury, but Mercury is just the planet that is to do with rote learning. So the teacher holds up the letter T. What sound does this make? The children say t, 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 T. But the Jupiter is when they take that leap of faith. They start putting sounds together to form words, and words together to form sentences, and sentences together form paragraphs, and those paragraphs lead to essays. So, Jupiter to me is the planet of learning. But yeah, I'll mention Mercury and Venus and a little bit of Mars, but I just don't focus on the inner planets.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Jupiter, Saturn, and a bit of Uranus, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. So, what steps, if an astrologer is quite categorically wanting to work with young people, what should be the next steps?
Police clearance. You really should have police clearance to work with children. I think unless you're a teacher or somebody who has a qualification working with children, if you want to read children's charts, you should pursue that qualification. As I said, Kepler College is doing a full course on it in the autumn, and MISPA, I've done the child protection talk for MISPA as well. So there are resources that we're putting out there to address these questions. I just want to keep everybody safe, astrologers safe, because if there was a complaint, it's going to hit the news. It's going to be in the newspapers, the way people feel about astrology, and to me, child protection is such a big thing. Ever since the baby P case, everyone is really hot on keeping children safe. Baby P was the baby that was murdered by its carers, its mom and boyfriend. So it's a terrible, tragic case. But what I see in schools everywhere, because I work in lots of different schools, is the phrase "it could happen here." So we are open, and we're reporting things, and we're talking about our concerns, and because we want to keep our children safe. But in an astrologer's practice, we want to keep the astrologer safe too.
No, that's very thought-provoking. That's really helpful. Thank you. Is there anything else that I haven't asked that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's about all. I am doing a column for OPA, the Organization for Professional Astrology. The article you have is the first one. So there's 3 more coming up. The next OPA magazine is around the time of the solstice, so that'll be coming up too. So
great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll be talking a bit more specifically about how to read a child's chart with the parents.
Right, with the parents. No, that's really helpful. Thank you. So
Thank you.
Alex's blog is going to be going up on the wessexastrologer.com website. It's also on your own blog, isn't it? And also Alex's book, Growing Pains. This is Astrology in Adolescence, which is the source of how we met. So that's great. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.